Wonderful. Christy, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you, 3C Church, for having me. Brad and I are very privileged to be here. Our church meets on a Sunday at 4 o'clock. 4 p.m. And I'm sure if you try and get anyone off the beach at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, they'll look at you as if you're crazy. So we went with the flow. And yes, the table, it is an absolutely beautiful community that we are getting to lead there. And we also love the name The Table because it is about feasting, it is about community. But Jesus never let anyone stay at the table. We come to Jesus so that we can go out into the world. And so the table is about community, preparation, commissioning, and all those amazing things. And it's interesting to see that we're not the only church where no one sits in the front row. So come on, guys. I always we say to our guys, if we can stand up here, you guys can at least sit there. But it's fine. I'm used to it. It's fine. It's a privilege to be here, and the chat is really, I don't call it an organization because we wanted to catalyze conversations. We wanted to empower people, encourage people. And so that's what it exists for. And it is so great to be here in person. The first two were fun, and it was fun to do them in my slippers, and you guys watched in your slippers. But then I did get to put my red shoes on to come to you today because I always wear them. It was one of my friends many years ago said you need to wear those red shoes when you talk. The logo came first and then the shoes. And it's really great because I speak to a lot of teenagers as well, and I always say they're never going to remember me, my name or whatever, but maybe those red shoes will just bring something to mind at a moment when they need it. So this morning, and then also just to say we have 3 wonderful children. A daughter who's 14 and twin boys who are 12, and they're at home studying, I hope, because they have exams coming up. They really are a delight. So, I always think when people stand up and start talking about stuff that they haven't gone through yet, I'm like, what is that person talking about? So my daughter hasn't started dating yet. We are still trying to figure out even what our grid is for that. But it is definitely something we have lots of conversations about. So just up front, if you were wondering whether I'm going to tell you what age you should let your kids date and whether you think you should let them date, I want to disappoint you right now at the beginning so that you don't wait the whole talk for me to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you that for a couple of different reasons. The first reason is those have gone before me in this space. Some of them have done that and then kind of 20 years later told people to stop buying their books because they were wrong. And I don't want to get into that space. And then secondly, because the Bible doesn't actually tell us when we should let our kids start dating, because it was written into a cultural context. If we follow the dating blueprint of the Bible, we will give our girls to an old man at the age of 13 and get some money in return. And I'm not quite sure that's how you want to let your teenage daughters date. So it was a different time. It was a very different space, and dating has changed a lot. But I want to start with the scripture because Although the Bible doesn't tell us how to date in 2021, it does contain all the wisdom we need in a culture and a time which says that we as human beings have all the wisdom that we need for this space. And I came across the scripture the other day, and it really hit me straight on. It says, it's Isaiah 50, verse 10 and 11. It says, who among you fears the Lord and listens to his servants? Now, we know when the Bible says fears the Lord, it's not terror cowering in a corner. It's awe, respect, wonder, and love for God. So who among you fears the Lord and listens to his servants? Who among you walks in darkness and has no light? Okay, how many parents feel like sometimes they're walking in the darkness and have no light? Every day, every week. Teenagers, sometimes you feel like, what on earth is going on here right now? Who am I? I don't understand this world. I don't know. I can't figure this out. So we often will walk in darkness and feel like we have no light. Let him trust in the name of the Lord and let him lean on his God. This is the big part. Look, all you who kindle a fire and who encircle yourselves with torches. So these are now people who are making their own lights, lighting their own torches, living their own truth. Look, all you who kindle a fire, who encircle yourselves with torches, who walk in the light of your own fire and of the torches you have lit. This is what you will receive. You will lie down in a place of torment. So just a really light-hearted scripture to get us going. But a very biblical truth is that when we light our own fires, when we come up with our own version of truth, when we try and think of a different way to do it that doesn't line up with this amazing blueprint we've been given, it leads to torment. You only have to look around you at a generation of millennials, 60% of whom will never find a monogamous, loving relationship, don't even know how to start because they've grown up in a culture that glamorizes sex and completely devalues self-sacrificial, loving relationships. So that's just a little scripture to get us going. And I know today we've got all sorts of different generations, demographics. We have professors who are raising a generation of wonderful young people. And so I hope that although some of this may not directly impact you in your life, you will glean some truth, some encouragement from it. So just a little bit about how dating has changed. And today is going to be very practical, rooted in scripture, but very practical. Dating's changed for teenagers and adults alike. For teenagers, for adults, you just have to think of a few generations ago where, like I said, in biblical times, we were given away. As women, we were given away without any say in the matter. And then, we went into that era of courtship where there would be chaperones, and your suitor would come and have tea, but there'd be someone watching, making sure nothing inappropriate happened. And then we would have this. Then maybe you'd be able to go for a walk in the park, in the gardens. And then the car. The car was a big game changer for dating because now suddenly men could come and pick women up and take them out of the house, to the terror of parents. And this was a big catalyst into independent dating away from the family. And that took us kind of into the era we've been in for the last, ever since the car was invented. But in the last kind of 10 years, we've gone into a whole, maybe a bit more, 15 years, we've gone into a whole different era of dating. We have Tinder culture where, often you'll find someone online, not even face to face. There is a big emphasis on sex without emotional intimacy. The 1970s took sex out of the safety of marriage, and it became recreational. And so now where we find ourselves is this very complex space where often sex comes before dating. So you hook up with someone and then you decide if you like them. And then for teenagers, let me just grab some water. Yeah, this change has impacted teenagers hugely as well. One generation ago, teenagers who did have sex would normally have sex with a partner that they were dating or in a relationship with. But hookup culture has fed through into our teens. And often there is a very prolific hookup culture even in our teens. And not only actual sexual intercourse, but it's kind of feeding down into even our children's first intimate sexual experiences, like kissing. Because when we talk about sexual intimacy, we're not just talking about intercourse. Obviously, it's the giving of ourselves in an intimate way to another person. And having a teenager myself, I know that the culture she's growing up in, and I'm going to use some lingo, just forgive me, they have what they call a pull culture. So they talk about pulling one another, which just basically means kissing someone you have no relationship with. And they talk about their pull count and how many people, and being degreened, which means you've pulled someone. And it's kind of this thing of, it kind of dawned on me the other day that this kind of culture of of kissing people that you have no intimate relationship with is just a microcosm of hookup culture. Because it's let me be intimate with someone I have no emotional connection to. Let me keep my body and my soul and my emotions separate. And so they're kind of growing up in this culture. And sexual activity outside relationships is very common. And of course, social media is making it increasingly complex. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's kind of hard to lineate relationships with teenagers right now, but it often goes, I talked to my daughter, I was like, okay, what is the language? We chatting. Sometimes we vibing. We might pull. Then we together or together without a label. That's a good one. We together without a label. We dating. We've broken up. So it's very complex. And sometimes you go from like one space to the other. And so it's a lot more complex than when I was a teenager, where someone would ask you out, you'd go out, and then someone would break up with the other person. So it's very, very complex. But so how do we start? Where do we start even helping ourselves? You know, there's singles here, so this is for you. This is for parents raising teenagers, and anyone who speaks into the lives of young people. How do we start? Well, whenever I think about scriptures, whenever I think about relationships, I always go back to God's prototype, to his original couple, and that is Adam and Eve and the creation of man and woman. And I always start from this space in Genesis 1, where from verse 26, it says, "And then God said, 'Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. They will rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and the livestock and the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on earth.'" So God created man in his own image, and he created him in the image of God. He created them, male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and every living creature that crawls on earth." And then jumping ahead to Genesis 2, verse 22, it says, Then the Lord God made the rib he had taken from the man into a woman and brought her to the man. And the man said, "This one at last is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman, for she was taken from man. This is why a man leaves his father and his mother and bonds with his wife, and they will become one flesh. Both the man and his wife were naked and felt no shame." One of my most beautiful, precious scriptures in the Bible for me is that last scripture that said, man and woman were naked before one another and felt no shame. It was this one moment in history where relationships between man and woman were perfect. There was no shame. They were vulnerable. They were open. There was no brokenness. There was nothing to hide. And there was just this perfect picture of the relationship as God intended it between men and women. And obviously in modern language, we would talk about that as a marriage because we believe in the covenants between a man and a woman that God created. And that scripture says a man shall leave his parents and be united with his wife. And so this for me is a beautiful picture. And from this text, we see sex as this beautiful gift that's given to couples, not only to make babies, it says, fill the earth and subdue it, not only to bond them together. I don't have time to go into all the chemicals and stuff that bonds a man and a woman when they have sex, but also just this beautiful, pleasurable intimacy with them. So what I'd like to do just for the next little while is I just want to go through a couple of what I feel are some of the areas we need to talk about or think about when we talk about dating, whether we are parents talking to our children, whether we are considering dating, whether we are teenagers thinking about whether we're ready to date. And so I'm just going to go through a couple of points that I feel are important. Number one, sex is sacred. I've just spoken about it in terms of the scripture, but I just want to say up front that sex has no place in dating. None. Our culture tells us that it does, that often it comes before. They'll talk about things like sexual compatibility, things that have absolutely no scientific basis. In fact, what I like to tell my teenagers is that studies show that the people who have the best sex are middle-aged married people. That's not what our culture tells us, but that is the truth, because sex is something that you need to practice, something you need to get good at, something you need to see what the other person likes, what you like, how you can work together. Sex is not fireworks and rainbows the first time you do it. And that is why sex does not belong outside marriage. Sex is so powerful, so beautiful, so complex, and so amazing that only marriage can contain it well and create a place where we can enjoy it as God intended. Often our culture will portray, young single people as having the great sex and the old married people as having the boring sex. Well, that is not what research tells us, and that is not what the Bible tells us either. And I always tell the teenagers that I speak to that sex is for pleasure. We have the Song of Solomon in the Bible. It's like literally an entire book of the Bible telling us about sex and about the relationship as it's intended between men and women. If God didn't want sex to be pleasurable, why is that in there? If it was just to make babies, why is it in there? Sex is beautiful, but it is not beautiful there is no such thing as casual sex. Like I said earlier, sex bonds us to the person we're having sex with. There are very powerful hormones that are released in men and women when we have sex that bond us to the person we're having sex with. Really, really helpful and amazing in a marriage. Not so helpful when you're 15 and you have absolutely no intention of being in any way bonded to that person, because that bonding happens whether you like it or not. And so where our culture tells us that casual sex can exist, it actually cannot. And this relates to every kind of sexual intimacy between couples. We are, by design, from the Bible and from science, we are designed for monogamy. We are designed to bond to one person. And actually, when we bond to lots of other people before we get married, that bond is weakened. And we have to work that much harder to stay satisfied and connected to our spouse. And because sex bonds us, it is supposed to be part of a total union of mind, body, soul, spirit, economics. And so we should be socially, legally, economically, and emotionally committed to a person that we are having sex with. The culture of casual sex and hooking up, unfortunately, is one that our children are growing up in now. A landscape where we hear this phrase, sex positive, which basically means anything goes as long as no one gets hurt. Follow your heart. If it feels good, it must be right. Sex can be purely recreational, and it's glamorizing sex in this way that makes it more important than relationships. And interestingly, it's when you read up on it, it's kind of like it's a way of training your body to disassociate from sex, because as human beings we're designed to connect during sex. You actually have to retrain your brain to not connect, to be aloof. And so what it actually leads to ultimately, and this is what we're seeing in this generation that is now going into their 20s, is something called defensive detachment, where your brain actually teaches itself not to attach to the person that you're having sex with, because it is so confused by the constant bonding and breaking and bonding and breaking and bonding and breaking that it's going, I actually can't bond anymore because I just don't know what I'm meant to be doing right now. And so what that does is it puts up these walls within ourselves that make it really, really hard when we find someone we do want to have a relationship to bond with that person. I just want to read this quote to you, and it says, sex outside marriage bonds us in an unhealthy way that clouds our judgment and makes it impossible to be impartial and logical. So often when we do choose to have sex with people outside marriage and in relationships outside marriage, it clouds our judgment of that person and of the relationship. That's why you often see people staying in unhealthy relationships with people, because they are sexually active and connecting in that way. And interestingly, statistics show that couples that live together have a much higher divorce rate than those who don't. And a lot of the time, that's because if you're living with someone, you're having sex with them. So you're bonding to them in a way that's unhealthy, and in a way that you can't actually make an impartial, logical decision about whether this is the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. You almost fall into marriage as the next logical step to living together, rather than going, is this the person that I really want to share my life with? So number one is sex is sacred and does not belong in dating. And often teenagers will say to me, okay, Christy, so how far can I go? If I've heard this question once, I've heard it 100 times. Wrong question. Right question, how much of myself can I keep to share with someone one day? How strong do I want my bond to be with my husband or wife one day? How can I best honor this gift that I've been given so that I can use it to the best of its intention? Number two is that when we are thinking about dating, or when we're talking about dating with our children, we need to define it, because it's a very broad concept, and depending on who you're talking to, it'll be different. You know, for a lot of our culture now, dating means you're hot and I like hanging out with you, so should we date? But obviously, when we think about dating as followers of Jesus, and as people who root our lives in the Bible, dating has to have a purpose and an intent. My favorite definition I've come across in all my research is that dating is practicing loving someone well. Dating is not even about me. It's about how well can I treat this person? How can I practice how to live in an honoring, self-sacrificial way towards this person as I interact with them? And then to talk about the purpose of dating. You know, a couple of maybe in the I didn't grow up in the church, so this wasn't my experience, but I know for a lot of Christian people growing up in my generation, you could only date someone you knew you were going to marry. Like, that was it. Dating was like the first step before marriage. And I think that put a lot of pressure on our young people to know for sure. But I think it's important to at least say, this person's marriage material. This is the kind of person I could see myself sharing my life with. We share values, some of those things. And we don't just date in a casual way. I love Danny Silk's, he talks about the 7 pillars of dating. Love, honor, self-control, responsibility, truth, faith, and vision. So kind of to talk around those issues with our children, or think around them. You know, what does love look like when I'm dating? How does Jesus love? Because we're not going to love like the world, because that's all about lust, actually. How does Jesus love? How can I love this person like that? How can I honor this person and myself? How am I going to have to control myself? Am I interacting in a responsible way towards myself and my future? Obviously, faith. Does this person follow Jesus? Is this someone who I can be yoked with and walk into my destiny with? What is my vision for the future? And then also, especially if you have teenagers, talk about some of the reasons you don't want to date or you wouldn't date. What are some of the reasons you would choose as a teenager not to date? Maybe some of those are because, you know, when you're in an intimate relationship with someone, there's going to be temptation. And maybe you're not strong enough for that kind of thing, and you want to stay away from it. Breakups are messy, you know, stuff like that. People change. It's fun to be young and single, some of those things. And then if we feel like our teenagers are ready for relationships, or if you feel like you are ready for a relationship, think about, what is it going to look like when I date? What are my reasons for dating? Talk to your children about things like consent. How to remember their friends in the process. You know, I see teenage couples, when teenage couples do date, they love to isolate themselves away from their friends. And so to talk to them about those friendships, talk to them about the pace of a relationship, about perspective and about vision and about all those things. And then also important to talk to our children and also think about it ourselves. What do toxic relationships look like? What do codependent relationships look like? What are the red flags for those kinds of relationships that we don't want our children to get involved in? And what are some of the reasons we do? Why do we stay with someone we know is not good for us, and have those conversations? And then what do honoring, beautiful relationships look like? And again, Danny Silk says, honoring relationships is the practice of two powerful people putting one another before themselves, empowering one another, and calling out and believing the best in one another. That's a vision of dating that I want to give to my children. Not he's hot and he's going to make me more popular if I date him. No, I'm a powerful person. I don't depend on him for my value or my identity. I'm a powerful person. I'm confident in my identity as a daughter of God. He's confident in his identity as a son of God. I believe in him. I see the gold in him. And this relationship is about us learning to walk together and draw that out of one another. That is the vision of dating that I think would be great for our children. And then the next is a very practical thing. And, one of these words is one that we've kind of it kind of gets us a little bit irritated. Boundaries and accountability. This is key, especially for our teenagers when they're dating. Like I said, teenagers like to isolate, and we've seen it even in our own church. Some of the young people, when they find, and not even, like a lot of the singles, once they find someone they want to date, you don't see them at church because they don't actually want you to speak into their life, because they're scared that, you might actually see that this person doesn't follow Jesus, and they don't want you to tell them not to date them. And so you kind of isolate. And we have seen so many train wrecks because of that isolation. And so if you are dating, and teenagers, adults, all of us, if you are dating, do it with accountability. Have someone you talk to about it, and talk to honestly. You don't tell half-truths and what that person wants to hear, but someone you trust, a youth leader, a parent, someone you trust who you can see that they're going to see those blind spots, those things that you don't see. And maybe it's going to be uncomfortable, but open yourself up to those relationships, because community, that our church is all about community, but community is where we're safe. We have this saying that friends are like toddlers. When they go quiet, there's trouble. And so that's often where we're like, there's a red flag, something's going on here. So if you go quiet and you're seeing someone, it's often because you know that something's going on, and you're trying to kind of isolate yourself. So accountability is incredibly important, and as are boundaries. Boundaries are honestly, they're, for me, a game changer in relationships, because boundaries show you how much someone respects you. Because if you put down a boundary and that person's pushing that boundary, the respect is not there, the honor is not there. And it's really a great indicator that this is not somebody you want to have a relationship with. And then obviously they just keep you safe. So talk about boundaries up front, especially teenagers. If you're starting to date, talk to the person you're dating about what your boundaries are. What are your physical boundaries? What are you going to allow to happen? Have you decided you're just going to hold hands, or you're going to kiss? What do those boundaries look like? Decide them up front. You don't want to decide them, when you're alone watching TV late at night. That's not the time to go, okay, how far are we going to go here? Decide what they are. Decide things like, we're not going to be alone at night watching TV when all our parents are asleep. We're not going to text late at night when we're lying in bed. Think of these things where you will be vulnerable, where the enemy will come in and he will derail your relationship, and put those boundaries down with a level head, and talk about them, and then talk about them to the people or the person that's walking alongside you in your relationship, whether that's your parent or a youth leader. And it's really, really important, boys, I'm talking to the boys, that you put down boundaries. Girls are very confident right now. The future is female, down with the patriarchy, men suck. That's kind of the vibe right now. And girls often want to show you how powerful they are, and how much they're the girl boss. And you're going to have to put down your boundaries and go, I'm sorry, but these are my boundaries. I will not do that because I respect you and I respect myself and I respect my future. So boundaries are really, really important. And then the next thing is beware of blurred lines. I feel like dating is very, very blurred right now. We have the just friends, we have the girl boy best friend, we have the vibing, we have the chatting, we have the online chatting. There's a lot of unclarity in dating. So if you are starting relationship with someone of the opposite sex, have clarity around those relationships. What do they look like? What is the intention? If you're a teenager, or any of you, actually anybody, if you haven't heard it, go and look for a song called All My Exes. Anyone heard that song? I wish I live in a world where all my exes were dead. I wish I could kill the memories inside your head. It's a very good song. It sounds hectic, but it's a very good song. But please, when you look for it, look for the clean version, okay? But it's such an excellent illustration of my next point, which is that we need to date with integrity. Okay, because the chances are you won't marry the first person you date. Statistically, you probably won't. So that person will probably become your ex at some point. And this song is all about the fact that this girl hates the idea that her boyfriend has all these past experiences with these other women. And she wishes she was the only one. She wishes he had waited for her, that she was the only girl he'd ever been with. And it's so interesting to me because it's not a Christian song, but it speaks to God's design. It speaks to the fact that we are designed to want that person to give themselves completely and only to us. And so if you're dating, date in a way that when that person does become your ex and you're dating someone else, you can speak with openness, freedom, and integrity about what that relationship looked like. It's super, super important. And I love this idea is that if you're not dating your future spouse, you're dating someone else's future spouse. So treat that person in the way that you hope that whoever's dating your future spouse is treating her or him. And that the person that you're with, when they do go and marry someone else, there's not part of them connected to you. They can give themselves completely to the person that they are going to spend their lives with. Next point. Technology has made dating incredibly complicated. Oh my goodness. It is important, young people, to think about this and parents to talk about this. It is so complicated. And my first point is, please keep your level of online intimacy the same as your level of face-to-face intimacy with a person that you are in a relationship with, of any kind. You can't be sending photographs or messages or speaking in a way online that you would never do face-to-face. They need to line up. And I've seen this with friends of mine who've used apps like Tinder, where they've met these guys online, started to chat, last conversation before bed, first conversation when you wake up in the morning, this emotional attachment to a person they've never laid eyes on, bouncing into the office, so excited about this person they found, meeting them, nothing about it works. Devastation, torment. Don't be more intimate online than you are face-to-face. It is a recipe for disaster. You don't know the person until you know them in person. Those of you who were on my previous talks, I may have told this story, but for those who weren't, I counseled this family once where this, probably about 2 or 3 years ago now, where this parent phoned me and said, I was given your number by someone, I need your help. And she was in Joburg and she was in the car with her 15-year-old son. And she said, my son's got himself into trouble. She said he'd met this girl on Instagram, beautiful, teenage girl. They'd started chatting on DMs, direct messages on Instagram, started to get to know each other, started to chat, started to vibe. And then she sent him a nude and said, please send me one back. I love you, whatever the language would be. I just want to see you. So he sent some nudes back to this girl. And as soon as he did that, she went quiet and completely ghosted him. He couldn't find her on Instagram, couldn't get hold of her. A couple days later, he gets a phone call from a man. I have all your photographs. Unless you pay me this amount of money, I am sending them to your whole contact list, which he had from their Instagram connections. This girl had never existed. Never existed. And if you've watched clickbait, you will know how this happens. and so this boy had fallen in love with an old man. It is so easy to become intimately connected to someone online, to give ourselves to someone that actually doesn't even exist, or a version of someone that does not exist. So be the same person on and offline. The way you speak, what you share, what you say. Online dating is not a thing. It's a fake version of something beautiful. And then the next thing I want to say just about the online space is that unrelenting connection is not healthy. At the boys' high school where I've been doing a program for the last little while, I met this boy who, and unfortunately at the school, the boys are allowed their phones all day. Every single spare moment that boy had, he was messaging his girlfriend. He would do it between lessons. He would do it during lessons. And he said, ma'am, if I don't message her every 10 or 15 minutes, she gets worried. And if he doesn't get messages back from her every 10 or 15 minutes, he starts to think, has she forgotten about me? They had this incredibly toxic, codependent relationship going on. And I said, well, what about when you're face to face? He says, man, we don't even know what to talk about. We can't talk to each other face to face. And so the online space is something we have to be very, very aware of, that we limit our connection to people we're dating, that we allow space. One more thing about just a couple of other things just to think about in terms of how social media has changed dating. Number one, the dating pool has widened. You know, you no longer have to date someone who's at your school or who your cousin knows or whatever. It's like you can date someone from anywhere. Number two, the constant contact, I spoke about that. Social media is a massive source of jealousy in relationships and insecurity and manipulation. Why has my boyfriend liked that girl's post? What do those two hearts on the comment mean? And it can create incredible insecurity. Sexting, we've already spoken a bit about that, but that is a very, very dangerous space, and I encourage adults and teenagers alike to stay away from it. Never mind the fact that if you're under 18 and you send a nude of yourself to someone, you are creating and distributing child pornography, and it is a criminal offense. But don't go there. You don't know where those photos are going to end up. And actually, it's been proved through research that sexting actually breaks up relationships. It does not bring people closer together because it causes objectification in relationships. And then also the last thing about how the social media space has complicated relationships is our children are losing the ability to date face to face. I spoke about that boy at Northwood, and we see it a lot where if I ask those boys, how many of you ask girls out and break up with them face to face, they go, no, ma'am. No, ma'am, how orcs? How orcs? Then what do I say after I've broken up with her? I have to just stand there and go, do I have to go to her house, break up with her, leave? Like, I just can't do that. They go, so I said, please don't break up in a text. So they're like, okay, ma'am, can we do it on FaceTime? So I was like, well, FaceTime's better than a text, but when we're not, because dating is like, it prepares us for life as well. It prepares us for awkward situations, putting other people before ourselves. silence, how to navigate silences, how to create conversation, how to break up with someone, how to process rejection, all of those things. And so, but obviously the online space has complicated that. So just be aware of that. And then dating has a destination. I think this is important to talk to our teenagers about, and Brad and I were talking about it on the way here. If you already, so we were just saying, research and kind of Bible history says that Mary was about 13 when she got married. But now we're dating and getting married a lot later in life. And so if our children are starting to date, which is happening around the age of 11 or 12, 13, Brad teaches grade 7. He'll tell you they're dating, whatever that looks like in their context. How do you fill that space between 12 and 28? How do you feel that if you're already having intimate relationships at 13 and generally relationships progress? So I think when we talk about dating or think about dating, we think about where is this going? Like what is, where am I going? I always say that I always ask the teenagers, I was like, who are you becoming by what you are doing? Every decision has a destination. Where are you going? What do you want to achieve from this? What is your vision? So kind of to talk about that. And I heard an excellent analogy a little while ago that I think articulates it so well. So if we think of Professor Joshua, he probably studied for a very long time to become a professor in economics. And often when we have so say a 13 or 14-year-old decides they want to be a doctor, they have a vision. They want to be a doctor because maybe they want to help people, they want to be financially secure, they want to drive a Ferrari, they want to go on overseas holidays, whatever. But they have a vision of what life looks like. And so what they will do to move towards that vision is they will make a whole lot of sacrifices. Maybe when other people are out jolling, they're at home studying. Maybe when they really want to be chilling out, they are at the books. They're going to work hard. They're going to make sacrifices. They're going to make choice after choice after choice. And they're going to miss out on some stuff that other people are doing, but they know why they're doing it. And then they're going to become a doctor. They're going to become they're going to reach that dream, and they're going to live in the fruit of all of that hard work and all of that sacrifice and all of those good decisions. So we do that for our careers, but we don't do that for our sexuality and our relationships. The way our culture looks at sex and relationships is, let me just do whatever I want right now, and then when I'm married, I have to pick up the pieces, heal all the brokenness, and try and put together some kind of whole relationship. And so I just, like, when we're talking to our children and our teens about dating, to like put those kinds of visions into them. Like, what do you want your marriage to look like? What do you want your sexuality to be like? And talk to them about sexual formation, that every decision and choice is forming you into someone. And what do you want that person to be? Because if you're promiscuous when you're 14, chances are you're going to be promiscuous as an adult. There's no magic wand at the altar that turns you into a faithful husband or wife. You are developing your character by the choices you make. So talk about how important those choices are. I'm almost done. I've got 2 more points. The second to last one is that dating has a time and place. Another of my favorite scriptures is that God has made everything beautiful in its time. And I do believe that relationships between men and women are ordained by God. That it's part of how he's made us, and it brings us great joy. Let's be honest, that excitement of meeting someone and being attracted to them, those feelings, those butterflies, those the feeling of sexual attraction, sexual intimacy, relationships, having someone that's like the closest person to you, that you can share anything, that you can be unashamed with. This is part of God's design, but it does have a place and a time. And to talk to our, maybe if you're a university student, maybe just think about, okay, if I am having a relationship, what does that involve? Do I have the time to put another person, to take care of someone else's needs and to put them ahead of myself? Do I have money to take a girl out on a date? Do I have a car to get her there? Is this actually the right time because, to date well and with integrity, do I have the maturity? If you're a teenager, is this really something that I have the capacity for right now? I've got to go to rugby, I've got to study, I've got my mates, I've got church, I've got youth, I've got a whole bunch of other stuff. Is a girl, do I have time for that right now? Is this the right time? And I just encourage, especially teenagers and young people, is know your season. There's a season for dating. And to be honest, I think in your teenage years while you're at high school, it's probably not the right season for it. Again, we're not going to, I know this is being recorded, so if someone sees my daughter dating next year, they're going to be like, but Christy said. I hope not. But anyway, I think that the season of being a teenager is an incredible gift. Young, free, single, friends, so few responsibilities. It's just a time to have fun with your friends and figure out who you are. And research shows that we actually only really know who we are by about the age of 26. Amazing, hey? So if you're 13, probably the guy that you're attracted to, probably not the same person you're gonna want to marry one day. We're still figuring out who we are. Being a teenager is about figuring out who you are, developing your character, developing self-control, integrity, all of those good things. So I think it's just wise as well to know to know your season, and to really, really ask yourself, is this the season to complicate my life with another human being? We always say every person who's added to your life, what do we say? Enriches your life and complicates your life. Are you ready? Yes, maybe you want the enrichment, but are you ready for the complications that another human being is going to bring? And then my last point is have grace for yourself. Single people, unmarried people, parents, have grace for yourself and have grace for your children. So first of all, just to the parents, connection and unconditional love are the focus for me of parenting. They are the things I will always fight for above all else. That my children know that I am here, that I am a safe place, that they can come to me with anything, and that nothing they do will ever change the love I feel for them. We were all just chilling before bed last night, and this is where fighting for connection is also practical. We'd finished dinner last night, it was around 7, and both our boys were like, "Can we watch?" That means they want to go and play Brawl Stars, and we said, "No, you can't." And we 3 of us ended up on our bed, and Brad and Ryan ended up watching some sports highlights, and there were just these moments of connection, and we started chatting on the bed, myself and Blake and Emily and Brad and Ryan in the other room, and we started talking about what I was talking about today. They're like, "What are you doing tomorrow, Mom? What is it about?" And I had spoken at a girls' conference yesterday morning where Emily was, so we were talking about some of the stuff we'd spoken about there. And then Emily said, "Well, what would you do if I go?" Because one of my best friends had her son at 18, and the son is one of my son's best friends. And so my daughter was like, "Mom, what would you do if I got pregnant at 18? I said, "I would love you. I would love you, and I would help you. I would feel sad for you at what you'd given up, and the road that lay ahead for you, and the things that you were not going to experience as a young person because of the choice you'd made. But I would love you, and I would love that baby." Unconditional love and connection. Our children are going to do dumb things. Their prefrontal cortex is only developed at 24. That's the brakes. That's the logic. That's the, is this a good idea? Part of your brain. The amygdala, raging. The emotion, the passion, the what is the word? Impulsivity. That's what's growing fastest in their brains. They're going to do dumb things, just like we did. They are going to doubt. They're going to have questions. Really, Mom? Is this the way? Is this the way I'm designed? Really, this old book? Is this the path to life? Really, Mom? There's so many more evolved ideas right now. They're going to doubt. They're going to break hearts, and they're going to have their hearts broken. They are going to have to suffer the pain of rejection and possibly the ache of unrequited love. But either they're going to do these things quietly, by themselves, or they're going to do them with us. And let us as parents be safe places for our children to make mistakes, to ask questions, to doubt, to get cross, and let our homes be places where they find healing, where they find wisdom, and where they find where they navigate their consequences, where they mature and where they heal. And as parents, I say this to my daughter all the time, I have not been this way before. I am going to mess up. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm going to not give you enough freedom. I'm going to give you too much freedom. I'm going to wish I hadn't done this, and I'm going to wish I had done that. But we are going to make mistakes, and we need to have grace for ourselves. Because honestly, I don't know if you ever do this, but when my daughter messes up, the first thing I think is, what have I done wrong? How have I parented her wrong? Where did I miss this? But we have to have grace for ourselves, and we need to walk humbly with Jesus. Honestly, humbly with Jesus. Just going, I don't know how to do this, God, receiving his unconditional love, living in his unconditional affection, so that we can constantly going to him for our wisdom, for our courage, for our strength to do it to the best of our abilities. And honestly, we live with an unchanging, ever-present, solid God in a very fluid world. This is solid. His ways are solid. I see it in every piece of research I do. I see it in the families that I talk to. There is no other way than this. And honestly, when I have to speak into context where I'm not allowed to bring Jesus in, I feel like there's this like when you have a table with 3 legs and you're like, oh, okay, this is how, but I just want to go click and put that leg in and go, okay, this is how it should be. He is our absolute, Jesus should be at the center of every conversation we do and every decision we make, not an optional extra. Okay. And so just as I bring this to a close, I want to say that the Bible might not give clear instruction on how to navigate Instagram dating and Tinder culture and all of those things. But there is so much wisdom in this book for us and all the wisdom we need. And I just want to end with one piece of wisdom that I always go back to, and that's Proverbs 29:18, which says, without vision, we cast off restraint. To be honest, as we talk about dating, as we think of what's the right way, what's the wrong way, this is what we're going to allow our children to do, this is what we're not going to allow them to do. If we don't know where we're going and we don't have a vision for our lives, it's just going to be a bunch of rules. And it's easy to throw off a bunch of rules when we don't feel like it. But when we know where we're going, when we've got Jesus and his pattern of beautiful human flourishing, if we think back, my vision for my children is Genesis 2. That's my vision for them as they date and as they pursue relationships. Naked, unashamed, before the one that they give themselves to. And so, and that's what I say that. And my poor daughter yesterday had to sit in this talk while her mom said that I have great sex, and that's what I want for you. That's what I want for you. When you're 40, how old am I, babe? 40 something. See, got my back. That's what I want for you. Not just great sex, but this. I want this for you. I want this relationship for you. And all our decisions around dating and relationships, that's where I want them to lead you. And then as we make our mistakes along the way, we figure that out with Jesus.
Brilliant. Okay, hands up if you learned something today. Oh, yeah. Brilliant. One, 2 people didn't put their hands up.
What?
But they're really good. Thanks for being courageous. Thanks for doing all the research. Thanks for having a great marriage. Thanks for being honest and open.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And our church is smaller than this. And we do actually have quite a lot of teenagers, but that is, and we don't have youth or anything like that yet. So what we've actually decided is we have encouraged our children to go to youth where there's life. So actually, our daughter goes to youth at the Rock, which is actually a combined youth between Harvest, the Rock, Glenridge, a few different churches, because they've also seen the need for this bigger context, and it's full of life. Honestly, it's probably Emily's highlight of her week. And she meets, and because with high school, often you end up going to a single-sex school as well. And it's really important to have male friends as a teenager. It's super important. So we've done that. And then our boys go to One Life Youth, which is in Northlands Primary in Durban North. They have a very vibrant kind of junior youth. And so we believe in going where we know our children are safe, where we trust the leaders, and where there's life. Because it does seem to us that God does somehow, there's like, and I know up in Westville, there's often very big youth groups. Westville, I think a lot of Westville Baptist and a few of those churches historically have had these big groups of youth. But I think as long as you know your children are in a safe context, it's really great to allow them to go into those bigger spaces. I don't want to, if you guys have a different view on it, but that's just how we've seen it, because we can't offer that right now. And we want our children to be exposed to like lots of different people. And to be honest, in those bigger contexts, not all of them are saved either, in those youth. And so we almost feel like in this season of their life, their youth it's not their church. The table is their church, where they are grounded, they belong, they serve, and they are taught. But in those teenage years, they need input from leaders who are speaking specifically into their context. And the Rock Youth is led by Luke MacDonald, which I think a lot of people will know. Sheena and Doug MacDonald is his son. And he speaks about stuff that's pertinent to them. And they journey together, and they pray together, and they really are getting built up in that context. So that's how we do that. But at the same time, we are also very much, it's our conversation right now, is how do we do that in our own house as well? Like, how do we take these teenagers we've got and bring life to that so that we can build it in our own space as well? Do you have anything to add to that?
We've advocated the same. There was another... Okay.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And often I think the thing about this is teenagers will only really feel it later, because they're so caught up in it right now, and they see it as their normal. And you're so right. I was talking to some youth leaders the other day who are teachers at Kloof High, and saying, by grade 9, you are the exception if you're not sexually active. And so it is really going to take courage for our young people to choose this. And again, like I said earlier, it's not just about holding on to your virginity. It's about your heart and your soul and your whole being. And so, there are so many ramifications of being sexually active. Some of the consequences, there's that bonding that happens. There's that chemical bonding where there's these unhealthy, and in Christian language, we call them soul ties, but they are a clinical condition where we are bonded to people in a way that we don't understand when we're sexually active. So we have this jealousy and this not wanting your friend to date that one because you still got they still belong to you, and that whole mess. And then those chemicals that bond us to people in our sexual intercourse, those chemicals are reduced, like I said, in lower and lower amounts. So we're seeing casual sex. The more casual sex you have, the easier it is to do, and the more numb you become to being connected to a person. So that is why we're seeing millennials now, who are the first crop of this full-on hookup culture. They don't know how to even start, let alone sustain a relationship, because, and so it's literally breaking down the fabric of our culture, because not only are they unable to successfully be in a monogamous relationship because they don't have the relational skills, self-sacrifice, those kinds of things, but it's even impacting their ability to parent. If you ever have to lay down yourself, it's when you become a parent. And so we have this generation of millennials not knowing even how to do that, because they've not learned how to give up will lay down their needs for the needs of someone else. It's just the physical side of it, and not the relational, intimate side of it. Obviously, we know our appalling teen pregnancy stats. We don't even need to go there. STDs, all of those things, we don't need to go there. And I think, it's really important for us to remember that it's just this gift we've been entrusted to. I heard such a great story a little while ago. There was a speaker like me, and she was speaking to a group of matric boys. And this one boy said to her this exact question: "But ma'am, when I'm in the change room after rugby and everyone's talking about who they hooked up with, who they're going to hook up with tonight, what's their pull count, how many people have they had sex with, what am I meant to do? Like, I'm like Kippy virgin over here, and all of them are men, like we men, this is because we men, we're showing." And there's this hectic culture in our schools where if you're not sexually active, there's these homophobic slurs, and is there something wrong with your penis? Let's just use the words. Like you really can take a big hit. And so this question was posed, and the speaker said, it's easy. You just say this. You say to those guys, "Tonight, I can choose to go out and become like you, but never again can you choose to become like